after making it through 17 months of nothing like we've ever experienced, Canadians deserve to choose what the next 17 months, what the next 17 years and beyond will look like.
A leader who cared about the best interests of Canadians would be straining every sinew to secure the recovery right now.
I believe that there's a serious possibility that Canadians and Quebecers will make a choice that will not give him a majority.
Many people are wondering why this selfish summer election. Well, it's clear Justin Trudeau wants to grab power.
We are here because the Liberals have decided that they want all the power.
As you heard there, the timing of the election call dominated much of the messaging and the questions to party leaders on day one of the campaign. So how did the fellow that made that decision make his case today, Justin Trudeau? How did the other leaders respond? Let's bring in at issue for a special Sunday edition of The Gang, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj, all back from their summer hiatus because we told them they had to be. So here they are. Chantal, I'm going to start with you. So obviously this is the first sort of question and issue on the table on day one. Why now? How do you think Justin Trudeau justified this decision today?
As well as he could, which isn't saying much. This was never going to be a great day for the Liberals because of the election timing issue. And up to a point, the best spin you could put on it was probably what Justin Trudeau put on it, which is, I'm giving Canadians a choice, a chance to assess their political leadership. Mm-hmm. The word majority did not really cross his lips over the course of that news conference, unless he was forced to it. I'm not sure that that makes it a good day for the Liberals, but it probably went some way to kind of neutralize the issue in the sense that this was the least damaging approach to the Liberals.
Andrew, in fact, Justin Trudeau said the other parties need to explain why they don't think Canadians should have a choice at this moment. What did you make of that kind of messaging?
It was a valiant attempt. I'm not sure it was terribly successful, but I agree with Chantal. It was predictable that he was going to get mauled on day one over this. The Liberals would have factored that in. It was worth it to them for the strategic advantage of having the early election. He didn't give a very convincing answer. He gave a sort of a convincing answer as to why he had to have an election rather than just carrying on with the existing mandate, and that is that we had to go and ask the people. He didn't really answer at all why we had to do so now, why we couldn't do so 2 months from now or 4 months from now or what have you, what was so special about right now. But in politics, a lot of times, it doesn't matter whether you have a good answer as long as you have an answer. And he was able to stammer out something. And so while he took some damage today, it won't be terribly bad. I think what's more interesting to see is what happens in subsequent days of this election campaign. Does this become the filter through which everything he says and does gets viewed as cynical, opportunistic? Do things get worse on the pandemic front or in Afghanistan? Right. The decision starts to look not just unprincipled, but callous or reckless. That's going to be the real test, is not what happened today, but what is the reverberations of this, if any, in the days to come.
Right, so it may sort of fizzle out in the beginning, but something could force it back into the conversation. Althea, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I guess if the COVID fourth wave is stronger than we anticipate, voters could decide to punish him for this decision. I think to Chantal's earlier point, the fact that he didn't say he was seeking a majority mandate, which is something that we heard from Stephen Harper back in 2011, shows that they do believe this is a vulnerable point for them, and that focus groups have shown, polling has shown that the arguments levied by the opposition hold some water, but they are hoping that reporters get bored with this line of attack and move on by at least week 2.
Okay, I want to turn to Erin O'Toole, the leader of the Conservative Party. He obviously was complaining about the idea that the election be called right now, but then he was forced to answer some questions around vaccinations. This was obviously something the Liberals wanted to press on him. Here's what he had to say.
Vaccines are a critical tool. They're safe and effective, and Conservatives, for the last year, as you know, have been demanding vaccine supply and access and encouraging Canadians to get vaccinated. I think we can also have an approach that uses a whole suite of health measures.
So we should say the Liberal Party, the NDP, they are requiring their candidates to be vaccinated. Erin O'Toole not willing to do that, and saying that other measures are just as important or also important along with vaccination. Chantal, what did you make of how this issue, how he managed that issue and that question?
Not very well. This is a fish or cut bait issue, and up to a point, the fuzzy positioning, vaccination if necessary or if you want to, but not necessarily, does not play well already with the majority of the public. Up to a point, Erin O'Toole has set himself and his party up for the fourth wave, turning them and not Justin Trudeau and the Liberals into a casualty. And that is, if the pattern we've seen over the past 17 months holds, the worse that the fourth wave is, the more that the public is going to want a more restrictive approach to what you can do if you're not vaccinated.
Right.
The governments that are getting punished in the polls for being perceived as more lax than others, that's not Mr. Legault and his curfew and now his vaccine passports. It's Jason Kenney, it's Premier Ford. So not a great answer, and frankly, not a very solid answer, considering that this was the most predictable question that was going to come his way. I think it has more legs to walk for longer than the election timing issue.
But Andrew, I guess he's sort of stuck because there are people inside his party that believe that healthcare choices are personal, private decisions and that they shouldn't be dictated by government. And that's who he's trying to manage there, is it?
Well, not just in his party, but further to the right, the People's Party. I think this, again, was an absolutely predictable mauling. I think the Conservatives were willing to take it on day one in the calculation, again, that the strategic advantages were worth it. In this case, the strategic advantage is keeping some distance, however small, because it's not a huge amount of distance between his position in substantive terms and the Liberals. But keeping a little bit of difference of saying, yes, I'm totally pro-vaccine and people should be encouraged to get it, but he's not actually going to mandate it, so that he can't be painted by the People's Party as just being exactly the same as the Liberals, because this is an issue they've been hammering. Now, obviously, that's not a mainstream issue. They're not going to win a lot of seats, the PPC, but they can deny the Tories some seats if enough voters who are worried about this issue glom onto it. So he had to make sure there was some difference between himself and the Liberals on this, even if he didn't look particularly comfortable or persuasive in doing so.
Althea, what did you make of his response? And maybe also his decision that today he wasn't going to campaign out on the hustings. He was going to sit up at the Westin here in Ottawa as part of his sort of response to the idea that an election is not responsible right now.
Yeah, to the first point, I don't think it's so much about the votes that he's worried about bleeding to the PPC and to Derek Sloan's new True North Party or to the Maverick Party at West. But I think that these issues are issues that suppress the Conservatives' own voter base, right. That is an issue that's important to their volunteers, to the door knockers, to the people who get out the vote. And this just shows yet again, it's a really hard job to be leader of the Conservative Party in Canada, because there is a growing gap between the voters that Erin O'Toole is trying to court and the voters that actually support him. It reaffirms the idea in people's mind that what if Erin O'Toole had been in charge during the COVID pandemic? Would we have had such stringent health measures? Would the pandemic be as much under control as it is if he had been in charge? And the other issue is, we hear this from all the political parties, one of the, in some ways, greatest assets Erin O'Toole has is that people don't actually know who he is. He's a kind of a blank slate. So the Conservatives have been looking to put the best foot forward. And today the Liberals managed to squeeze Erin O'Toole on an issue that many Canadians, most Canadians actually tell posters, he is not representing their values. They support mandatory voting, mandatory vaccines. We see that in polls, 53, 59, even as high as 2/3 of Canadians do. And now Erin O'Toole is offside with them.
A quick go around, if I can, on how events outside of the country today played into today, or how they might going forward, whether it be the taking of Kabul by the Taliban and the collapse of that country into their rule, the earthquake in Haiti, which has now claimed more than 1,000 lives. How do those sort of large-scale foreign policy issues play into a campaign? And I got to do a quick go around on this. I'm sorry, Chantal.
you're sorry that I get to answer first.
Yeah, yes,
I think
and then it's fast, yeah.
I think the Haiti catastrophe is in a different category from the Afghan
Yes.
images, and that those images of people being left behind, being stranded, are a bit of a nightmare, not only for the Liberals, also for the Conservatives, who were both very much behind the Afghan mission. But it is Justin Trudeau that is the Prime Minister, and if there is too much of a gap between glad-handing and the pictures that you see of people we have left behind in that place, it will hurt the Liberals.
They are, Andrew, already working with other allies to see who they can grab and sort of get out of the country. So there is some work being done, even as the campaign starts. But your take.
Well, let's be clear, politics aside, this is a moral failing. We made a promise to these people that we would get them out, and we failed them. That can and should be held to account of the government of the day, and will be. The specific connection people were trying to draw to the election, that somehow calling the election had caused them to take their eye off the ball, I think is a stretch. But the juxtaposition of sort of jolly campaigning and this terrible human tragedy going on in Afghanistan is not a pleasant one.
Last word to you, Althea.
I think in some ways this makes me think of 2015 when the picture of Alan Kurdi kind of put the Syrian refugee issue on the map. And I don't think this is an issue they saw coming. Nobody expected Kabul to basically fall today. But this is another theme, and I agree with my colleagues about the images being horrible. But those themes, keeping your promise, competent government, like if the Liberals cannot show that they can chew gum and walk at the same time, I think that will hurt them. And this is one of these issues that in a non-election time would be really difficult to actually harness all the resources of government to try to get these people out. It's going to be really quite something to do that without, with your politicians and your prime minister out on the campaign trail.
Okay, got to leave it there. Good to see you all on this Sunday, and I know you'll all come back here on Thursday for our regular panel. We'll talk about all the other parties and the various issues that will emerge over the coming days. Thank you all.